Hello everyone, welcome to the Teaching English webinar series for teacher educators. This month we are hosting a webinar facilitated by Professor Qing from University College London to explore practical evidence-based strategies schools can use to create supportive working environments for teachers. My name is Shirin Soyoz and I'll be your host today. Thank you very much for joining us in this live session. And let me introduce our guest for today. Professor Gu is Professor of Leadership in Education and Director of the Center for Educational Leadership at UCL Institute of Education. Her work focuses on educational leadership, policy, and international development. For further details, including her publications, please visit her profile on the University College London website. And I'd like to invite Professor Gu now to open today's session.
I wanted to say it's really a great pleasure and for me to be here and to have the opportunity in the next hour or so for me to share what we have learned about schools and about the teachers' work and lives and what schools can do to really keep our talented and capable teachers in the profession. We've written a lot about teachers' work and lives, and it is always very touching to speak to teachers because they're there to make a difference to the learning and the lives of every child in their classroom, in their school. So the way we look at teachers' work and lives, we really don't see only just individual teachers because teachers work in schools and the schools located in different education systems. So it is really important for us to understand and trying to make sense of teachers' work and lives and how and why they are making a difference to the learning of the children from the perspective where they work in a social, cultural, and organizational environment. And we know teachers really important, and there has been over the last couple of decades research evidence keep telling us why teachers are important. It's because what teachers do in the classroom makes a significant difference to how much progress their students can make in their learning. So, and it is especially important for more disadvantaged pupils, as evidence telling us when children from socioeconomically more deprived backgrounds, for example, and they are able to gain an extra year's worth of learning when they taught by effective teachers. And this is where we arguing very strongly teachers matter, and to improve any education system, the solution is actually very simple. We need to improve the quality of our teachers. We need to keep their motivation, their commitment high, so they stay in teaching for the right reasons. The right reason is related to how much they want to really give their best to the learning and achievements of children. However, if we look at teachers' workforce in many countries, it is really heartbreaking to continue to see the evidence telling us in many countries, especially in the communities where we need the best teachers, those schools and communities struggle to attract qualified teachers, let alone quality teachers, to really help to make a difference to the learning of the children. And the statistic is saying we need 44 million additional primary and secondary teachers really urgently in many schools across the world, especially in areas that really need the most support. This is a picture I took when I had the research conference in South Africa in a primary school. I've learned so much, not just about research, but also learned about life, about what education really means and what committed teachers can really, the kind of difference they can really make to the children, to their well-being, to their learning, to inspire the young minds. So increasing the different governments have tried different policies trying to keep our teachers, and teacher recruitment and teacher retention are interconnected. But the factors behind teacher recruitment and teacher retention are not entirely the same. And so in many countries, I work in England, in London, so there has been, over the last decade, no shortage of government incentives trying to improve the quantity. And here I mean the number of teacher professional development programs for either early career teachers or teacher mentors, with the view that by increasing the CPD, the continuing teacher professional development programs, teachers are more likely to feel they are supported and they are more likely to stay. And they believe it is a cost-effective approach to help our teachers to grow and to stay in the profession. And here is what the evidence is telling us. And by keeping more quality teachers, especially in socioeconomically disadvantaged, marginalized communities, many governments across the world believe that's a kind of effective approach to level up, to keep the education opportunities the same for every child in all parts of the country. And here the evidence is specifically referring to UK. But does it work? And there has been, since when I saw the research evidence from Harvard University, and also we have gathered an enormous amount of evidence in the UK, the evidence is saying that this, focusing on improving only individual teachers' knowledge and skills and disposition, the human capital approach, in other words, that solution is off the mark. Especially if we think about the amount of investment schools and governments have made to improve the number of CPD, continuing professional development programs, in the education systems. The simple question is, have we seen more teachers wanting to stay? And second one is, have those CPD programs really improved the learning and achievement of the children? Have they really improved our schools? The evidence is really, really highly limited. And that really gets us to ask whether this kind of approach, the human capital approach, the large, send teachers out to CPD programs, CPD courses, to improve their knowledge, skills, and dispositions, hence the human capital approach to developing our teachers. What is wrong? The fundamental conceptual flaw of this approach, we're not saying those courses are not needed, but relying on those CPD programs alone, we, one, have very limited evidence on seeing teachers wanting to stay, and two, very limited evidence to actually show us schools have been, the quality of education has been really improved. And this is because, going back to what I said at the beginning of the session, teachers work in schools, teachers work with teachers, teachers work with children. And it is really important we don't think about teacher retention and what policy and governments and schools to keep up teachers by really thinking of individuals. We need to think more about the organization, think more about the teams, think more about the connections between teachers and what they learn from each other, and to support each other to, do a really exciting but also very challenging job. Teaching, it is a physically, emotionally motivating, exciting, but at the same time exhausting job. Every school day is different, and for many different reasons. So when we look at the teachers' professional development, that's where it is really important we put our teachers in the school organization, because it doesn't matter what you learn, it's when you come back to your school organization, it's what the materials resources and the collegial support, the leadership support that you receive in the organization that enabled individual teachers to trial the learning, to enact the learning, and to make a difference. And we know from our evidence, in many cases, those things didn't happen. And therefore, it's like having one flower does not make a beautiful garden. We really need the kind of the collectiveness of teachers working together, teams improve their practice and the quality together. And that's where we are more likely to see teachers wanting to stay in the school. They want to work together to make a difference to the children, the very little people who, draw many teachers into the profession. And here, this is what I put on the slides. It is not just about the learning. And this took me back to a British Council's own report that was published in about 20, 30 years ago now, when I was still working in China. And the report is called The Qing Among the Chickens. So the Chinese teachers attended this CPD programs, learning what is the best methodology to improve their English language teaching skills. But when they went back to the classroom, to their own schools, they become almost a crane among the chickens, because they've had the most exciting, the latest understanding or knowledge about what effective English language teaching methodology should look like. But the whole school education systems, how good learning was assessed in that system, what parents' expectations were, what the school leaders' expectations were, are very much disjointed from the new CPD innovation. And that's where many teachers really have to return back to what the system would allow them to teach. And those are fundamental issues. And we've seen again in our research about why this only CPD, the human capital approach to improve our teachers, is not enough to keep our teachers. And it's not enough to transform the teaching practice. And I'll give you one example from an evaluation that I led in England, looking at research schools. They are good primary, secondary, special schools in the English system. So they translate the research evidence into CPD programs and through CPD courses. And what have we found? So the CPD, you can see the hand, the external CPD program provided by the research schools have been really rated, highly rated by teachers who participated in those programs. So the CPD program is about how we use research and evidence to inform our teaching. So the quality is great. And what it shows, if you can see, linking to the yellow box, the personal ability and understanding of research use reported by those CPD participants, by those teachers, were really highly. So they believe the attendance of those CPD program improved their knowledge and skills and understanding about how to use evidence to inform their teaching. But then the survey, the research evidence wouldn't support the individual improved knowledge and skills, linking to altered, changed practice, the blue box immediately under the yellow. It would only work if the individual knowledge and the skills feed into the yellow box in the middle, which is about the research use, the evidence-informed practice and culture within the school. Once it become a collective culture and capacity, then you are more likely to see teachers reporting they have changed their practice, and the changed practice really improved pupils' engagement and learning. And the collective culture and the capacity also feed more directly to pupils' improved engagement and learning. So the evidence here really is challenging us as teachers, as also as school leaders, if we have school leaders in the audience, to really think what would be the cost-effective way to improve our teachers. Sending out to the CPD courses itself does not improve the teachers. What we need to do is what we call the antecedent in this model based on surveys with our teachers on these programs. It all started with the red box on the left-hand side, is the support from the school principals for professional learning and development. If there is that structure and culture within the school, and they created the pathways to enhance the collective culture about the research use, this is where the CPD has been brought in by the school leaders to improve individual teachers' knowledge, to continue to enhance what the school already believe is the approach to improve teaching. And here is using research and evidence to inform teaching. And that culture improves practice and improves children's engagement and learning. So this is what kind of very a different way of looking at teacher learning and professional development, really put the focus on the organization. So it's not about individual teachers learning, it's about the organizational learning. The focus of the organizational learning is about how teachers really interact with each other. So the knowledge sharing, the improvement of skills is in the interaction between different teams. And the structure is created by school leadership and by how leaders would provide the opportunities to enable our teachers to learn. And if we look at meta-analysis, it would also support the kind of evidence we found in the evaluation. So there is that myth. I remember having worked with so many early career teachers. They join teaching, they want to work 25 hours a day. They wanted to give their best. And most of them go through a steep learning curve, but there seems to be a kind of a myth. After 3-5 years, how to teach a lesson, there seems to be a kind of a plateauing for some teachers and looking for more challenges. But if we use school as the unit of our thinking, then we find teachers working in schools with more supportive professional learning and development environments, they continue to improve even after 3 years. And importantly, vice versa is also the case. If the environment is not supportive, then we see teachers feel that their effectiveness really declined over time. Here's a kind of example. We did a case study school in England, an outstanding school, a primary. So after the school have been, outstanding for a few years, the head teacher had a new idea. So in the primary school, in the English system, we have the Key Stage 1 team and the Key Stage 2 team. So Key Stage 1 team would teach to children age about 7, so from reception year to year 2, and then from year 3 to year 6, you are Key Stage 2. So the head teacher said, let's swap the teams. Let's relearn how to teach. But he was able to do so because the school had already had a very collegial, collaborative culture, and teachers are very well supported to develop themselves in teams. That foundation, the trust, the relational foundation, the social foundation was there, and the head teacher therefore was able to do so and to give the teachers measured challenges. And by swapping them, that itself is about developing them. So relearn how to teach. And it's not necessarily just about sending up teachers to CPD courses. So when we talk about the supportive professional environments, some of you may ask, what are the key ingredients? And here's some evidence from the US, funded by the Wallace Foundation, looking at really about school leadership on student outcomes. But in the middle layer of this house, this schoolhouse, you would see 4 very important conditions created by school leaders, not just the school principal, but also the school leadership team, that the teachers are able, to make a difference to student outcomes. And what are they? I hope, when I read out, nothing would surprise you. It's about teachers having the opportunity to engage in focused interactions on teaching and learning. So engaging in instructionally, here it means teaching and learning. The interactions, so the conversations is very much about how I improve my teaching, how I improve the learning of my students. Related to that is building a productive environment, really nurture innovation, trying new ideas, having the creative thinking and working in teams. And that working in teams is supported by the third bubble. It's about facilitating collaboration and professional learning communities. And here I just wanted to say a small thing. I always get nervous when people talk about collaboration as if it is a given. And for us to study and do a lot of research about school improvement, we know it's absolutely not a given. It is an organizational culture and condition and shaped by the values, the vision, and the capabilities of our school leaders. I have been to schools to speak with teachers who told me they could be teaching behind the door for a whole week without speaking to any of their colleagues. Nobody would want to work in those kind of environments, and not, it's lonely. It's not supposed to be a lonely profession, not to mention that you wouldn't have the opportunity to exchange the best practice, to get the emotional and also the professional support, the banner from your your colleagues and also your school leaders. And the fourth bubble is very much about managing the personnel and resources strategically to provide the facilities, the time, the spaces and the resources teachers really need to collaborate. Teaching is a very busy job, and how the school organization would find a time for teachers to trial out new ideas together and to improve their teaching together, and that requires leadership decisions. And it's in those kind of school organizations we're more likely to see teachers really want to stay. We actually had a really interesting example in one of our case study schools in England. One of the early career teachers felt there was just too much for her in the first school. In England, they have to do a 2-year government-funded induction program, and this teacher felt, despite the school is very collegial, and she just wanted a change. And she went to a different school, and she went there and she came back after 6 months, because the fundamental difference was the second school didn't give her the opportunity to work with the team, to have the opportunity actually to see herself as a professional within the school organization and work with her mentor, work with her peers to learn and to develop herself. And that reminded her of why she wanted to become teachers in the first place. So we have some really interesting examples like that in our work, really again challenging policymakers to think more creatively about how to improve the capacity, how to keep our teachers in the profession in our schools. As this by Thomas Hedge, he's written really a lot of work around school improvement. We hear a lot about school capacity, but what do we really mean? And he very helpfully divided into 3 interconnected dimensions. The human capital, that's really important. So the ability of the people, the technical capital, so the resources we have, the facilities, those are important. but the schools won't improve if you don't have the relationships, the social connections between the teachers, between the teams. It is the three types of capital together really shape how strong the capacity is in a single school and how much potential it can make to improve the learning and achievement of the children. So that takes us in our work when we look at teachers' work and life to really think a lot more about the collectiveness, collective mind. Here, mind is a verb in terms of how teachers working together to really enjoy the sharing of the vision and the sharing of the practice. But it is where they work that enable them to have that inspiration and enable them to first, they're able to continue to learn, to thrive, and then they want to stay, and they want to stay for the right reasons in relation to education. So I'm going to pause for a second. Serene, I can't see. I just wondered at this point, do we have any burning questions from the audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Go. Your talk so far has been really very thought-provoking, and you have really clarified some key assumptions about teacher development. Could you briefly expand on what you mean by the human capital approach in this context? Once again, yes.
Yeah, okay. So what human capital means individuals, knowledge, skills, and the professional dispositions that we have, the characteristics we have. So the human capital approach tends to see individuals. So the system would provide courses and programs to help individual teachers to improve their knowledge, their skills, so that they can teach better. Some of you, I don't know whether in the audience they have, you've been to MOOC, for example, the online courses teachers voluntarily opt in. And that's perhaps one of a good examples to show the kind of the human capital approach. So it's about individuals wanting to participate in a program to improve the individual's knowledge and skills. And if we look at in our education systems, a lot of those CPD courses programs have been designed very much about sending individual teachers to upskill them and thinking when they go back to their classroom, to their schools, they are able to teach better. So that's the kind of human capital approach. So focusing on individual teachers, focusing on the human side, in terms of the knowledge and skills and the characteristics of our teachers, without thinking what I'm saying is limited because teachers only teach better and wanting to stay if they work in teams. So individual teacher, you can have individual teachers working in schools, but that one beautiful flower does not make a beautiful garden. It does not necessarily make the school a strong school in terms of effective school, in terms of improving the learning and the achievement of the children. The limitation of the human capital approach by focusing only on individuals overlooked the importance of the team and the organization. And only we have that collectiveness through collaboration in a school, the good practice becomes shared good practice across the school. That's where we are more likely to see schools improve.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And there was one question. You mentioned the importance of school conditions and leadership, and building on that, here is a question from the audience. So to what extent do issues like outdated or misaligned curricula contribute to teacher shortages? I mean, from your experience.
So about curriculum, could you just repeat the question? The misalignment of the curriculum.
Yes, outdated.
Outdated.
And it's again leadership. Yes, this was, let me find the exact question.
How is that contributing to?
Again, retention issues or perhaps
Right.
teachers' motivation.
Okay, so we have had examples, because depends on how you what do we mean by curriculum. Some people would say curriculum is the life of the school. You know, children's learning does not stop at the classroom door. So, you know, there are examples of sustainability. For example, how do we teach our children to live a sustainable life on the school site, in the community? So that is a kind of curriculum very close to John Dewey's theory. That's what we would see what curriculum is. So that's very much driven and connected with, of course, the educational values. And we have seen teachers leave the school when they feel their educational philosophy is not aligned with how they believe what the curriculum should be and how children should be taught. And that when the disalignment, when that happens, schools are more likely to lose our teachers. And vice versa is also the case when they see. I will actually give you an example later on in one of the is a case study 3, when really everybody shared the vision and believed what learning should be about, with the community as a world where children learn. You keep those teachers, and had examples of 6 early career teachers now become senior leaders, and one of them become a head teacher of a school in a similar community in the school cluster.
Yes. So they take an active part. They contribute also to shaping the curriculum, or perhaps they become part of it.
They do, because you know what teachers do in the classroom impacts on student learning, and we know teaching is an emotional practice profession. And David Hanson from Teachers College would call it a vocation, and that's because teachers get the joy and motivation, excitement from the progress that the achievement their children make. So when they believe the curriculum is not enabling them to achieve that, and it's not just professionally challenging for the teachers but also emotionally as well. You know, you kind of, whether you don't feel you are able to do the job that you come to teaching for. And that is quite some, you know, some scholars write about the ethics of teaching very much from that perspective. So curriculum in that sense is almost a vehicle. That's where what teachers do to design and to teach the curriculum so that they can make a difference. So it's absolutely at the heart of that. And when curriculum is doing well in a school, we see the connection as children making progress. The curriculum really would cater for that growth of the children. When I was a governor of a primary school back in Nottingham, I was living in, we have a curriculum tree from reception year to year 6. So children and the teachers and parents could see how the tree would grow in terms of developing different aspects of children's learning, how that tree is really rooted in the world, in the community, and also with connecting with the outside world to support them. So then, you know, then you are not seeing just a year 1 or year 6. You are seeing how the pathway of learning, and that is a curriculum which I think is really exciting.
Thank
And
you
we
so
don't
much.
have teacher retention problem. We don't have teacher attrition problems, I think, in that school, because it's, you know, it was one of the first 7 world-class schools in England. But it's, you know, this is where, as an academic, I always feel very inspired speaking with teachers speaking with school leaders in those kind of, especially those kind of schools, because that gives hope and promise, really show us what education can achieve. And that inner city school, so we have almost 50% of the children on free school meals. In English terms, is a highly deprived community.
That's wonderful. And finally, one last point. So you highlighted that evidence-informed practice only works when embedded in school culture. And in what does effective research use culture actually look like in a day-to-day school? You mentioned this briefly. Can you please expand this a little bit?
Yep, it's a difficult question because it goes to how we define culture. So some people and the way I see it is a way of, some teachers would say that's the way we do things here. So it's pretty much it's everywhere you see. When you go into a great school with collegial culture, you can see it and you can feel it and you can smell it, and you can, in a way, teachers work together, and you hear the laughs in the teachers' staff room, and you hear the conversations about, I've just had a wonderful lesson, and this child suddenly being turned around, and this is what the child did. Or I have a problem, can you help me, please? And so teachers wouldn't feel, because what toxic culture does to people, to human beings, is we're scared of asking for help, because you think asking for help shows I'm not very good at my job. But in a collegial cultured school, you don't see that. You would see I can think, I have a school in my mind. We wrote about it. We call it an oasis school in the most deprived communities in Nottingham City. We wrote about it. The staff room was like a business class lounge is white, is clean, is comfortable. Teachers feel respected when during the breaks they can spend quality time with their colleagues in a place that is nice. It is shows the care of the leadership, and they I met the children. The children, I mean, in England we use free school meals, percentage of children eligible for free school meals, to measure the levels of deprivation of the community. The national average was 24%. That school was over 70%, is the bottom 200 most deprived communities. The children were telling me, we are a caring school. We've just had some charity work to collect some money and to help children in Africa. And this is what we've done. And that brought tears to my eyes. And this is a school, children behave and thought their minds in this way because they have caring teachers, and they really brought the community into the school. And that's where I would describe a school that is collegial, and you see collaboration between teachers, among teachers. You see teams. You see the presence of the school leadership is not just a physical presence of the head teacher. The head teacher could be invisible, but she knows what's going on within the school, and the school would carry on as normal with or without the leadership, because there's a very, very clear structure, and everyone shared that expectation. We want the best for the children, and therefore we will support each other to achieve that. So that's I think yes, that's how I would describe. Not sure you've answered questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's quiet and it's noisy for the right reasons.
Yes, the school climate and everything, actually, sometimes not written, but yes, it's there. Thank you so much, Professor Gu. So we would like to hear more from your research-informed examples, case studies. So we will have another Q&A, colleagues, in the end. So
thank you. I'm not sure if I can get to the end, but I will try. So the the second piece of evidence, I'm leading because in England we have, as the government really wanting to solve the teacher shortage problems, they want to keep our teachers in the profession. So they have, now in England, all new early career teachers, new teachers will have to go through a fully funded teacher induction program. So within each school, not only early career teachers, but also their mentors are part of the program. Then it's 1 year for the mentors, but 2 years for the early career teachers. But what have we found? By simply attending those teacher induction programs, is it sufficient to keep our teachers? So that's our research question. And the short answer is no. And so here is based on survey. I know it probably feels very daunting. I'm just going to explain, unpack them step by step. This is what we did to you will see right at the end, the dark blue box is about teacher retention. So we ask early career teachers, this is based on almost 900 nationally representative sample of early career teachers, telling us whether the yellow boxes of the induction program is making a difference to their retention. The short answer is no, and I'm just going to explain why. The first key message from this model based on the survey is early career teachers, ECT, early career teachers' learning experiences on the induction program is closely associated with influence of the school leadership, the red box at the beginning. So what the school principals, especially senior leaders, do in terms of setting the expectations, creating the social relationships within the school and develop teachers, providing the resources, restructure redesign the organization to connect with the community, and also manage the teaching and learning programs really shape very significantly how early career teachers feel about this national induction program, because essentially it's about learning. So what research often doesn't get to the bottom is not just I go into a session, I feel great about it, but whether going back to your school, whether you can use the learning in the classroom. So we focus on that in our research. And it's very clear, if you see, the red circle, the ECF, so that's early career framework, this induction program, the use of learning in the classroom is only enabled by the professional growth opportunities created by the school. The use of learning is important because it improves teachers' self-efficacy, how they really believe they have the ability to make a difference, to be resilient, to have the job satisfaction. And that's what I mean. The use of learning is very much enabled by the professional growth opportunities created as a culture within the school. And that professional growth opportunity is shaped by what school leaders do. As I explained, there are 4 major dimensions we tested in our survey. And this is also important. What really, starting very far at the end, on the left-hand side, we have the leadership, what school leaders, especially head teachers, do. They create professional growth opportunities. And this professional learning and development within the school as a culture really enable the induction program to have an effect on teachers' self-efficacy, job satisfaction, well-being in school, whether they feel they belong in the school. If they feel they belong in the school, they feel they are supported, then they are more likely to stay in the school. And that is a very clear message, what we have learned. And we've tested the same kind of hypothesis with mentors, with school leaders on similar kind of professional growth opportunity and CPD programs that we lead at UCL. The evidence is very consistent. We see very similar pictures. And I think this example from the one early career teacher and the teacher's mentor pretty much explained. It's not what really has kept the early career teacher in the school is because he felt he was treated like a human being. He was cared, and also he had the autonomy. He had a voice in the maths department. He is the maths teacher. His learning was very much catered on the program. He had some special needs, and the school made it happen. And he felt he really wanted to learn, and he wanted to stay in the school and in the profession. The mentor said similar things. I could, be the best mentor, give everything he needs, but what really has made a difference is the institution that makes it possible. There was a consistent message from that case study school. People felt valued. They felt they had the opportunity to voice their views, their ideas, and they were listened to. And that's, again, features of what a collegial culture looks like, feels like. And there are important connectors, what we have found when we look at teacher mentors. So, similar kind of message. The picture is very much similar to what I showed in relation to the early career teachers, the collaborative school cultures, professional learning opportunities, and what school leaders do to really shape and improve the workload conditions. And this took us to look deeper into what workload means. And I get really excited about this because often when we look at research about workload, policymakers talk about workload, OECD talks about workload, they only ask, doing this, would that save you how many hours, how many minutes? But I was told by many teachers, stop asking me what this collaborative lesson planning day, how many hours it has saved me. It might have saved me a couple of hours not to do lesson planning on the beach when I'm on holiday because job done. But what is really important is this kind of activity, planning lesson together on a focused day with support of experts in my subject area, make me feel like a professional, and I think like a professional, rather than thinking about what I need to teach. I think more about how to teach and why I need to teach in this way, because that's related to how my students learn. And as a result of that study, it was interesting. Teachers wanted to stay longer of that lesson planning day. And I was saying, look, this is a workload project. You need to go home. But this is where simply by saying how many hours a particular activity may have saved the teachers really does not scratch in our view, and based on our evidence here, what workload really means to our teachers. What is really more important is workload becomes meaningful. They can see what they do is making a difference to themselves as professionals, as professional teachers. So they can improve their teaching practice. It's meaningful, it's motivational, because they can see the children learn, and therefore it's rewarding. So it's more related. When we ask the same question about workload, we get very different answers. So we used 4 positive emotions and 4 negative emotions. And it was really interesting to see the vast majority of our teachers reported very highly their workload, despite the manageability is hard. More than half of them said, 51%, said the load, the volume, the complexity is hard, but the work is meaningful and rewarding. Even the resentment, you need to see the resentment the other way around. They don't feel resentment. So it's actually a very positive picture. So that really takes us to trying to understand the meaning of workload and how we support our teachers. It is not by simply trying to think how many hours and how many minutes this may save teachers work. It's not really striking the point in our view, as we have learned from both the survey as well as case studies. So here's another, the last case study I will take you through to understand what schools can do to keep our motivated and passionate teachers. So this was I took a photo of the school. This is what the school looks like now. But when the head teacher took over the school, oh gosh, almost 15 years ago, the school has been in special measures for many years, and is in a city school with more than half of the children eligible for free school meals. And the corridor, it was a beautiful long corridor, was blocked. So they, almost blocked the flow, not only ideas, fundamentally block the flow of people. When people do not meet with each other, how do you have the ideas? How do you collaborate? So this head teacher took over, Angela, her name is, she saw herself as a positive disruptor, and that's what she did. And there are 4 different pathways from the case study. I followed her for almost 10 years when she first became a head. And, there are 4 different things, and she's thinking, she's really kind of trying to break down the barriers. First is to disrupt the mindset from the can't do, the fear of making mistakes, to really have the inspiration to take new ideas and work together as a team to explore what is working for the children. The direction is very clear. There's only one thing they want to achieve in the school, that is to improve the learning and achievements of the children. Once you get that focus clear, everything else, the decisions, seem to be easier to be made. The second is to break down the boundaries, not only so breaking down the walls to create a long corridor connected to different phases and different subjects within the school. That was a start. And then she had a different opportunities to bring teams together through the inquiry projects. So that's the pathway 4, through the inquiry projects, to really explore how we can improve our teaching practice together, and to have the courage as a head teacher to say, I don't know, and I want to inquire this together with you. That really reinforced the collaborative culture and the inquiring minds within the school. And not surprisingly, after I think 3 to 4 years, it becomes an outstanding school, still outstanding. It's also one of the research schools in the country, because he wants to lead the research-informed teaching and learning, speak really, to the core of the inquiry's mind, and the growing capacities. So people, there are teachers who've been there for many years, didn't really like what she was promoting, and she was trying to enact in schools, and they left. So she had a empty vessel, really had, she was short of teachers. Then the 6 new teachers, early career teachers, came in. 10 years on, when I went back into the school to see them become senior leaders, one of them become a head teacher in a school in the same trust. It's just wonderful to see how these inspirational leaders not only keep our teachers in the classroom, but also grow them to become leaders of pedagogies, of schools in our systems. So these are the values, what she created, to use geese as, each goose on the wall represent one value. And what matters for them is they fly towards the same direction. And again, going back to your question, Sirin, about what a collaborative, culture looks like. And that is, when you hear a year 6 student telling us what these geese represent, what it means to them, that's one of the, artifacts we can see when we go into a great school. And around the corridor, you would see children's work, parents' work, to really show, to represent, to express how they understood each of the values they represent. More than 10 years on, these geese are still flying on the wall. And accountability is a tricky word. Often in English system, when you think about accountability, we think about Ofsted school inspections and too much government policy pressures and assessment pressures. But within this school, we're not painting the easy and rosy picture. But what they have really done well, accountability is one of the geese flying on the wall. It become a internal accountability, become a kind of internal value that we all share. We are accountable and responsible for the growth of our children. So there's no point putting the energy into fighting against the external noises. Let's focus on what matters most to the children. And that's how they were able to progress really quickly as a whole school. The inquiry's mind, I talked about what they has really worked is they work in teams and have inquiry projects really focused on teaching practices, how to improve the quality of teaching and the quality of learning, and to have that mindset to ask questions, to explore new ideas, and to work together. That came through really strong. So it is accountability of what you are here to do and why you make the difference. And breaking the boundaries. And we know often for schools serving very marginalized and disadvantaged communities, sometimes because parents themselves didn't have very good educational experiences, or for many reasons related to the infrastructure, the parents could not get into the school. And what successful schools often do, and this is one example, is to bring the community virtually, physically into the school. They become a social hub of the community. So it was wonderful to speak to some education assistants. In English systems, we have that role in the classroom. They are volunteers from the communities. And for some of the parents, they didn't have jobs because then the school would provide opportunities, helping them to upskill them, being a teaching assistant in the classroom, helping your children, working with the teachers to improve the learning of the children. So that really has brought the community into the school. So, more than 15 years on, that particular education assistant we spoke with become the leader of education assistant for the whole 18 primary schools in the trust. And that's what a great school can give, not only to the teachers, but also to the community, to create that sense of belonging. So I'm going to jump slightly. What I wanted to focus in this, ignore the quote, but it's really about the knowledge. And going back to the ability of the people, the accountability. What's really important when we think about developing schools and keeping our teachers, it is not the matrix that really make a difference. It is about improving the ability of the people. Then the matrix will naturally become better. So what we have learned? Now, I love this quote. Good leaders change organizations. Great leaders change people, because people are at the heart of any organization, especially a school. And this is where I meant, by focusing on simply developing individual teachers is not enough to transform a school. We need to think about teams. We need to think about collaboration and culture. And therefore, what are the conditions and opportunities to enable teachers to meet, to work together, and to feel inspired and rewarded for what they achieve, so that the organization can flourish. That means children will thrive and achieve in those organizations. And in our work, we kind of identified schools, the retention is not just about you focusing on retention. If you think about the complicated structural equation model I showed you from our teacher induction program, the retention is an outcome. What really has those schools have been doing well, the sticky schools, is they do many things well. And to have that work, especially the productive work environments where teachers feel valued and feel valued to work together to achieve the socially valued goals for all students. I took this photo when I was in South Africa. It was a turning point for me as an academic. I'm thinking, as an academic, you can write publications being, read by 10 people in the world based on theory, but that doesn't change the world. it was looking at these community-based young people joined our program, they're learning, working together, how to read to young children. And then when they go back to the schools in their community to read to the children, one of the school head teachers told us the attendance increased to 100% because children want to come in. They read with people they know, and some of these young people, including this young man, wanted to become teachers as a result of the project. And just again, that's what I mean, how wonderful it is for all of us to work in this profession called education. We all have different roles to play. And I love this quote that Professor Christopher Day and I wrote many years ago. The environments in teaching will always change. And teachers really have to learn to live new lives. And it is the school and the education system, of course, with individual agency, together, we can really help our teachers to learn to live their new lives together. Thank you.
Well, we thank you, Professor Gu, for such an insightful session. So there was one comment I'd like to see, read some other comments. One of our attendees mentioned, I'm glad to hear the way schools treat teachers as individuals, which is absent in many places. And another comment, as an academic professional interested in educational development, I was struck by your point when you mentioned that leadership should create a collective mind. And the question is, in your experience, what is the single most effective strategy for a principal to shift the school culture from individual teacher to a truly collaborative professional learning community?
Great, thank you. Thank you for those comments and the hearts, and it really means a lot to me. Thank you. I'm very grateful. It always means a lot to me as an academic to see our work had made sense to the teachers. I'm feeling quite emotional here. There are many things school leaders can do to really improve the collaboration within the school, and what we found 4 key broad areas of leadership practices make a difference. First of all, is to set a clear vision and have high expectations. So high expectations is different from just working hard. It's high expectations is about how we work together to improve the learning for our children. And that is a very clear vision. There are different ways of successful schools we've studied across the world. I'm leading the International Successful School Principal Research Network. But in essence, it's all about the children, and we have that in mind. When that vision is very clear, the expectations is, when it breaks my heart to think about the school head teachers talking about what do you expect of these children. That's all they can. You basically put a ceiling of children's achievement. That's what I mean, having high expectations of themselves and also of children. They also take the responsibility for their learning. That's important. Secondly, then you need to develop teachers. So the human capital in terms of individual teachers, but also collectively, how we develop teams and build the social relationships. So appoint teachers and grow them so they are like-minded professionals. That is really important. So it was actually quite interesting for us to look at successful schools and turnaround schools. When schools being turned around, a lot of the school leaders don't actually sack teachers, and the school have been stuck because those teachers haven't had the right professional development opportunities that would meet the needs of them as human beings and also as professionals. So when those needs have been met, you are more likely to see teachers wanting to stay. I can't help thinking of a deputy head I interviewed. She cried in the interview with me, and she said, I used to work so hard and we couldn't see the improvement of our school. And what this new head teacher has done so well is to understand the needs of the children, understands the needs of us, what are the skills we really need together so that we can grow as a team. So there was an early career teacher coming in to do the teacher training. She begged to stay in the school. And that's a school with almost a 70% free school meal. The national average is 23. That's the kind of school. So social relationships build opportunities for teachers to meet, like what I showed you. Break down the corridors. If people don't meet, how do you collaborate? Yeah, and create that kind of culture. Third is then to redesign the organization. Think about the structures. Think about the appraisal. Think about the connection with the community. Do you have the opportunities to create an organization that is socially connected in terms of relationships and infrastructure, resources? There's an example I can give is when I was the governor of our primary school, we have charities during the school term to come and support children to do different extracurricular activities. They didn't charge the school, but then as payback, during summer holiday time, the school would give the schoolhouse campus for free for the charities to use for community activities. That's, there are creative ideas school leaders can really do to redesign the organization so that it becomes a hub of the community. Finally, focusing on the teaching and learning. That is the heart. And here is not just teaching is not just about helping children to pass exams. It's really about how to inspire the minds of the children. If they're feeling cared for, cared about, and motivated, wanting to learn. And you can only achieve high quality teaching when the high expectations for teaching becomes a culture. So conversations is about how I can improve myself. The examples I give, those are 4 pillars that we've tested out in many different countries in our research, and they do have very significant impact on student learning.
Thank you. And yes, there was another comment. I hope school leaders will be able to hear your talk. Yes, they really have such enormous effect to the cultures of the school. And we should also remember that this takes time, right? We shouldn't expect an immediate change. So the school leaders need to be also determined and patient in this process. So it happens with that.
So it takes time to shape a culture. The evidence is showing it takes about 5 to 7 years for a whole culture to be really rooted and consolidated. So what really worries me when we go into schools, especially those schools that are vulnerable, people just want a quick fix. But often there are no quick fixes. There are certain things you can fix, but quick fix culture, that's very, very challenging.
So in that sense, yes, your finding also, you mentioned this from the beginning, the shift from developing teachers to developing the conditions in which teachers can thrive. And then the question is then from how we train better teachers to how we design schools where teachers can continuously learn and support each other. So what are your final recommendations to teacher educators who would like to start this, maybe inspire the school leaders or inspire other teachers in their schools? So any final comments who would like to start?
Because teacher educators may not be a short answer, but I'll try to be quick. Teacher educators mean quite different things in different systems. So if we take them as some of them are school leaders themselves, and I do think it is how we have, and if those teacher educators are working in universities, so we're really talking about partnerships. So how the teacher educators, the schools, and initial teacher education would be universities working in partnerships. So school needs to understand they have a lot role to play in terms of shaping our future workforce of the teachers. And for many teachers, perhaps in this audience, you will be school leaders yourself. So to have that kind of understanding is absolutely fundamental. And that's why at UCL, in our center, UCL Centre for Educational Leadership, we do believe in deeply the significance of nurturing, supporting the best school leaders. They they create the best teachers for the children who deserve the best teachers, especially those children in very challenging circumstances.
So supporting school leaders also as well as teachers
Yes.
is also
To
important.
have that partnership. So the UNESCO would say education is a social contract. So everyone has a role to play. It is about how the partnership, school is not just a house. School is a social system. So the school leader working with the district leaders, with the local authority leaders, how the teacher educators would really try to understand that they are only a cog in the system. So yourself cannot change the world. But then it's for policymakers to make sure that different cogs connect with each other so that our teachers come in, can focus on what is most important for them. That is to change and improve the learning and the lives of every child in their classroom.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Gu. Well, I believe that's the most sustainable approach. And thank you so much for sharing your research with us.